Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Laura Korup, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Chezian Sivagnanam is the Chief Enterprise Architect at the National Science Foundation. Debbie Stevens is Deputy Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And Steve Prescott, Executive Program Director for Public Sector at Oracle. And let's start with the strategy that pretty much every agency finds it has to have as we move into this second phase, I would call it. Let's say it's Cloud 2.0. The first 10 years took us to this point. Now we're really moving fast. And agencies are finding that pretty much multiple clouds are the way to get anything done in cloud. There's no single cloud that does all this. So let's talk about how you handle multiple clouds from a technology standpoint. There's interoperability if it's needed, connections. How does this generally work? Laura, we'll start with you.
Sure. Certainly the framework where we know that we're going to need multiple clouds and we want to plan ahead for what that might look like in the future, have the right ideas set for outcomes and incentives to help make sure as we're making technology decisions throughout the year, it's moving towards that strategy. Some of the things we keep in mind is certainly using managed services, software as a service offers a great benefit to federal agencies. When that's not an option, we're going to have some cloud service providers that follow the managed service provider as a platform as a service, and then certainly having infrastructure as a service available as a cloud capability. There's a place for all of those in our future cloud target state architecture. As we think through those, you can't treat every decision as a one-off, and it's not just technology decisions. Ultimately, it would be great if we knew exactly what the business requirements were, we could meet them in multiple places and could just make the technology decision. But oftentimes you can meet some business requirements here, different business requirements there, and then by moving that data, there's going to be a set of related applications or analytical tools that also need to use that same data. So having a governance structure within the agency where we can tee these decisions up as a set of jointly related technology and business decisions to plan the sequencing is really important.
So you might want to have tools and applications that need to use the data that's in multiple clouds, even though those clouds might be doing other things in other instances, in other words.
Absolutely, and having conversations early on that hit on some of those in-state outcomes is really important. If you start planning for just one application, you can get really far down the road on planning before you stop to think about, well, wait, how do we want to use this data in the future? So knowing those key considerations and having those strategic conversations early in your planning process, so then you can dig into the details with confidence for a particular cloud service provider is really important.
And I imagine the cost of data motion when required from cloud to cloud or cloud down to agency is one of the considerations in planning.
Absolutely, and at the Securities and Exchange Commission, we've recently appointed a Chief Data Officer, as many agencies have following the legislation that was enacted last year. And we really see that planning as a partnership between the Chief Data Officer, the business, and the Office of Information Technology to make sure we're really thinking ahead for those needs. Okay,
and Chezian, the Office of Science, National Science Foundation, little different animal, less operational, maybe more policy-oriented. Tell us your cloud strategy and how you rationalize that whole multiple cloud idea.
Sure. National Science Foundation is a single mission agency, so most of our IT is aligned with our mission objectives, right? So we have strategy going into the cloud, like 4 main reasons. Improve agility and improve the resilience and the speed and delivery of IT services. Number 2, consolidate all our digital assets and put them behind the high-power intelligence-enabled services. And we know cloud is the best place to do that. And then the third one, obviously, is like getting a seamless customer experience. This is our shared services strategy. Just want to make sure that the customers who are going from one organization to other, they all get the same experience using some systems, right? So, and then the last one is shifting our workforce to focus more on the mission. And then, there are better people in the world who does good job managing data center, patching servers. So we want to let them do their job, and then we focus on the mission thing. So those are a high-level strategy. With respect to how we rationalize the the services. Let me begin with, there are three places we usually look at: the investment levels, IT services level, and the technology level. At the investment level, mostly we want to make sure all these investments are strategically connected with these objectives. At the services level, that's when we look for, like, any service that we are planning to move to the cloud. We look at it. Okay, SaaS service, is that the best place to go first? If not, then platform. And then the very last we do is infrastructure as a service. But when we do infrastructure as a service, we have a strategy to break these monolithic applications into the microservices platform, to make sure we build agility and speed into that, because that's when you're going to take advantage of the cloud, right? And then at the tools level, gone those days when we managed our reference architecture, the technical reference models, where we try to rationalize only on the cost basis. We don't want multiple redundant tools. Now it's very different, because you can just buy on demand and cost a lot less than what it used to be in the past, right? So what we do is we built a engineering review board under our change management process. So that group has representation from cybersecurity, infrastructure applications, enterprise architecture. So we let every change go through that, and we manage a technical reference model to really rationalize the tools level. So that's at a high level how our rationalization plan works.
Yeah, I guess it's fair to say that even though you're using clouds for all of these services, that does not get you out of the systems architecture and technical reference disciplines. When you are moving applications and data to the cloud, and cloud service providers will be your IT, that doesn't get the agency absolved from having to have good, solid architectural approach to what you're developing and deploying.
Right. So from that model, what we did was, we know, like going back to Laura's point, so not one provider is going to give everything for us. We need, and today somebody may be good in the industry, tomorrow they may not, right? So we need to have clearly an exit strategy. So we're building a multi-cloud architecture with a cross-connect layout, where the cross-connect layout enables us to buy services from multi-providers, right? With respect to data, to your point, we want to also make sure there's a clear exit strategy from each of these providers, because the architecture that we built kind of allows us to take software SAN-based replication, take our data from one provider and then put it on the other, right? So, and this way, the future we are looking at, when we move our data, we did this exercise 2 years ago. When we moved from Boston to Alexandria, we moved servers. It's not going to be the case in the future. We'll be moving data. So we won't be dealing with physical hardware. So we want to make sure this architecture is set up, and also, more importantly, confined with the federal cybersecurity standards.
Okay, Debbie, how are things at USPTO? Active? And just to illustrate how fast your data is growing, less than 2 years ago, I attended the ceremonies for the 10 millionth patent issued by the United States. And just a few months ago, 10,500,000. So the pace of activity is increasing for the USPTO. And so I guess your data is going right along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're at around 10,600,000 for their utility-based patents, for sure. And for the USPTO, our journey is maybe a little bit different. I think Laura and Chezian both mentioned the data aspect, so did you. We approach the cloud as a business decision first and a technical fit for purpose second. So our strategy is certainly engulfed in data that we have to hold private for a certain amount of time. That's in our pre-grant publication time frame of 18 months from earliest effective filing date. And then once it is past that 18 months and or issued as a patent, matured to a patent, then that data becomes publicly available. So in our strategy, it's clearly focused on the business and the data aspect, the data ownership, I think Laura mentioned having a chief data officer. We're in tune with that at the USPTO as well, understanding the relationship between the data and the technical fit for either multi-cloud or a variety of on-prem solutions. So for us, the assessment of our inventory by application is key. Because again, looking at it from a business and technical fit, what will make sense? For some of our applications, we know already that perhaps the cloud is not the solution. And then how do we make it more secure, more resilient, disaster recovery? So we have those, we'll say them challenges or opportunities to work through, but we're engaged, we're excited about the journey and the path forward, and looking to collaborate with our business as well as our industry partners when we're ready.
All right, so Steve, tell us from the Oracle standpoint, the original on-premise data center type of company, now a cloud provider and doing all those other things, looking across the government set that you deal with, what does it look like from your standpoint with respect to how agencies are rationalizing all of their resources and mapping them across multiple clouds?
Sure, and Tom, I like the way that you framed this early on, that in a sense we're all entering the second decade of cloud computing. In the early days, a lot of federal agencies had a vision and a hope that they would be able to choose a single cloud provider, be able to quickly shut down the data centers and move everything to that single cloud provider. In reality, what federal agencies are finding is that they have a set of diverse requirements, and in some cases, they need to go to a set of multiple cloud providers where each cloud provider is kind of what you might call fit for purpose. Some are more designed for, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Others may be more focused on enterprise applications, data warehousing. And so there are a few strategies that we've seen federal agencies take. Number one, and this will sound simplistic, but it's something that's very important, which is look at your particular workloads. There's a wide variety of cloud providers out there, and they specialize in some cases in different areas. Look at your requirements. What are your back office applications? What are your data management requirements? And choose and take into account very much your specific requirements when you're choosing cloud service providers. A second thing, and this gets to your question around multiple cloud service providers, is that look for cloud service providers that have cooperative relationships with other cloud service providers. If they do that, it makes your job so much easier rather than having the cloud service providers pointing fingers at each other. Related to that is data will have to flow from one cloud into another cloud if you have an architecture where maybe the application is in cloud 1 and the database is in cloud 2, just as an example. Mm-hmm. And so look for cloud providers that have high speed and highly reliable telecommunication infrastructures, because you will benefit from that. And then the fourth thing, and the last one I'll mention, and this goes back to what several other people mentioned here before, which is, and I like to use kind of a marble analogy here. Imagine you have a set of stairs that has 4 steps. Top is software as a service, second is platform, third is infrastructure as a service, and fourth is your on-premise data centers. And let's say that you have a basket of marbles, and each one of those marbles represents a workload. What we are suggesting people do is don't start at the bottom with infrastructure as a service. Instead, start at the top. Take your marble and let it drop down and say, is software as a service a good fit for this? If it is, stop there. That's the fastest way for you to bring that capability to the table to your end users. If it's not, let the marble fall down to platform as a service. Maybe there's a good fit there. If not, you can use infrastructure as a service. It just means that more of the responsibility, more of the burden is on your staff rather than moving that to the cloud service provider.
Yeah, I guess that becoming a CIO or a CDO is a good way to lose your marbles, right? What you're trying to say in a nice way here. But that idea of looking at the applications first, and we'll get into this more after the break, but before we do, maybe we can start to discuss a little bit about how you do choose the applications, because I think there's almost nobody now still that is not with email and collaboration tools of one form or another in the cloud. So looking across the application set, how do you begin that rationalization?
That's a great question. Cloud can offer several different possibilities for applications. If you're moving to software as a service, it could be an opportunity to simplify and standardize. It could also be an opportunity to reinvent, to break up a monolith and focus on building out services in an innovative way. So as you look across all those possibilities, you need a framework. The thing that I like to think about is if you look at our entire application portfolio, all the emerging business needs, we don't want to spend our effort and energy innovating equally across everything. We don't really need to innovate on email. We don't really need to innovate on workflow tracking tools or correspondence tracking tools. So for our agency, one of the areas we want to really focus on innovation is around big data analytics and moving from a model where we're looking at individual forms that come into the SEC to more machine learning, risk-based analytics across a larger set of data. So how can we make sure our applications and our IT investments are going to unlock new possibilities in that space? So that means taking the part of our application portfolio where we don't need to differentiate, we don't need to experiment and innovate, trying to move those to software as a service providers, and then in a platform or infrastructure as a service environment, looking at how we can really support experimentation and innovation in those areas where we have unique questions to answer.
And just a quick follow-up on that before we go to the break. A lot of agencies are trying to get away from the yesterday approach of amassing all the data possible and then analyzing it, because that gets cumbersome and expensive, whether it's on-premise or in a cloud or anywhere. Data is just bulky. Are you also looking at ways of rationalizing the data such that you can use the cloud more efficiently and look for the anomalies and not have to search for some trend in all the possible data ever coming into the SEC?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that we need to do at the SEC is really sit with our expert staff who work with data on a daily basis and understand their needs. There are certain data sources that no matter the work that they're doing, they're going to need available as reference data. They don't need access to all the data within the SEC, but they do need very specific things that are going to drive some of our requirements around integration. So understanding the mission need first, understanding our business application owners, our data scientists, what they need to do their job, that's the place to start.
All right, we'll get into this with the other panelists, but first we're going to take a short break here. This discussion is The Journey to Delivering the Mission in the Cloud, Part 2, sponsored by Oracle and Intel here on Federal News Network.